Welcome to Introduction to Control Structures. These control structures are an important part of C language, and if you write any reasonably good program, you will be using the control structures. Without using control structures, probably you can write only small programs. You can only write small programs that perform primitive operations or trivial operations. But if you want to do good programming, you should master these control structures and use these control structures depending on the problem to be solved. So by default, the order of execution of statements is the order in which the statements are physically placed. That means if we place the statements say S1, S2, S3, S4 like that, the order of execution of statements is S1 followed by S2 followed by S3 followed by S4. But what if you want to execute based on some condition, or you want to execute certain statements repeatedly? So if we just place them sequentially S1, S2, S3, S4, then those statements will be definitely executed, but they will be executed only once. Now suppose you want to execute say statement S2 only if some condition is satisfied. Otherwise you don't want to execute S2. And also say if you want to execute S2 and S3 repeatedly, say 5 times, 10 times, or until some condition is true, then in that case if you just place the statements physically in some order, you cannot achieve that. So there should be some way of controlling the execution of these statements, say S1, S2, S3, S4. So those statements are those structures which control the execution of those statements. Execution of other statements are nothing but the control statements or control structures. They control the execution of other statements. Three types of control statements or control structures are supported. These are the general concepts. These are supported by all the programming languages, but different programming languages may support it in different ways. So three types of control statements or control structures are sequencing, that means the order in which you place the statements, the order of execution of statements. Selection, that means you select the statements to be executed. So sometimes you may execute those statements, sometimes you may skip those statements. And then repetition, that means you want to execute the statements repeatedly. So these control statements or control structures or control structure concepts are supported by different programming languages in different ways. So you have other ways of controlling also, like jump and go to. That means you can go to any statement or you can jump to any statement. That was initially used in the case of assembly language. Now also in the case of assembly language, you have to use something like jump statements. So you can go from one part of the program to any other part of the program. So in programming languages, it was supported initially using goto. Even C language supports goto, but the use of it is discouraged. Control statements provide the user more control over the program. Sequencing, the physical order in which you place the statements, the order of execution of statements. Selection, certain statements are selected for execution based on some condition. Otherwise, they are called as conditional statements. C language supports the selection by supporting these two control structures, if else and then switch. If else and then switch. By using switch, by using if else, you can write conditional statements. Repetition or iteration related statements, they are supported by the C language using while loop, do while loop, and for loop. Statements can be simple statements or compound statements. We are saying the S1, S2, S3, S4, etc. Those statements can be simple statements, that means you can say single statement, or they can be a group of statements, say enclosed in these flower brackets. Such statements are called as compound statements. So you can have control over the execution of simple statements and also compound statements. Statements can also be nested like this. That means statements are present here. So these statements are actually nested. They are within these flower brackets and also they are within this flower bracket. That means these statements that are present here are called as nested statements. So this is regarding the introduction to control structures. What we have discussed? We discussed about the use of control structures. What are the control structures in general, like sequencing, selection, and repetition? How the C language supports them, using if else statement, using switch statement, and using for, while, and do while statements. So thank you very much for joining.